Welcome back to the second installment in March of Ask Eddie and Ann. I'm Eddie Muller. I am joined by Ann Hockens, the Director of Communications for the Film Noir Foundation. Ann, how are you?
I'm good. I'm good. Yeah, I had a nice weekend, so busy.
So did I. My week was insanely busy and good, but yeah, the weekend has been terrific. I know this is probably this goes up on a Thursday or something, so we're kind of tipping our hand that we're actually recording this at the end of the weekend. But it was good because I actually got I just visited with some friends, socially distanced visiting, and had a very relaxed weekend after a very busy and somewhat tumultuous week. So it's all good. So I'm ready to go.
All right.
And I just, after this week, maybe some of the craziness will come out in our conversation. I don't know. But I just want to say how great the folks are who watch these shows and who ask the questions, because they're so thoughtful and coherent, and it's so much fun. Which you don't always get everywhere these days.
Yeah.
So much appreciated. So let's dive in and get it rolling here.
Okay, first one is from Pete. I really like your recommendation of The Amazing Mr. X, particularly the phenomenal cinematography by John Alton. But I am also interested in the spiritualism racket. I've seen Nightmare Alley, The Crystal Ball Mystery, and The Dane Curse TV version. Can you suggest any others?
Yeah, back in the 30s, there were a couple of really good ones. There was one with Claude Rains called The Clairvoyant. I think it's from 1935. That's good. And there's a wonderful film with Warren Williams called The Mind Reader that I think might be 1933. So that would be a pre-code film. And it's terrific. So those are two that come to mind right off the bat. I'm going to say Seance in a Wet Afternoon.
Oh, it's a great film.
Yeah, the Brian Forbes film is terrific. And you know, that kind of fits in that category as well. And any others that you can think of?
There's actually a Japanese remake of Seance on a Wet Afternoon that I highly recommend. And then also, I was thinking Night Has 1,000 Eyes, even though he's not in the racket, he actually has psychic ability and doesn't want to use it.
Yeah, that's a really good one. I had sort of forgotten about that because for that very reason. I mean, it's sort of like Night Has 1,000 Eyes, which I think is going to be coming out in a digital form pretty soon. I think. I may be mistaken, but I think Kino Lorber is coming out with that finally. Right. That's such an interesting film. It's like if people have seen Stephen King's The Dead Zone, read the book, or seen the movie, it's very similar. The Woolrich book is like the original Dead Zone, where the guy actually does have clairvoyant powers. He starts out as a con man at the beginning, you know, a carny act, a mentalist act, but then he realizes he actually does have the gift. And I can't say it's a really great film. There are things about it that don't quite work, but Edward G. Robinson is great in that movie. Yeah, and it's a good Gail Russell, you know, it's John Farrow, John Seitz, cinematography. It's good, and I'm really, really glad it's going to finally get a digital release.
I know, I'm excited. I didn't realize it was getting one, because I will buy a copy of that. I really like it, and the book's really good too. Yeah,
the book is great.
And then Pete had a second question. Have you read David Thomson's novel Suspects?
Indeed, I have. I have a copy of it right over here on the bookshelf. I read that book a long time ago. Yeah, really interesting book. David is a friend of mine, and that might be my favorite of his books, because it's just so creative. I mean, he's a great film historian, but that book, for people who don't know, is really interesting because it takes characters from the movies and he fills in their backstories and writes like the histories of these characters and then interconnects them all as though their lives are entwined in ways that you could never imagine watching the movies. So it's a very inventive and clever way of doing sort of a film history through the characters. And they're, some are set, some of the characters are from films of the 30s, 40s, 50s on into up into, I think it goes up into the 80s, because I know he has characters from Cutter's Way in the story. And it's just really interesting, the choices he made writing that. It's like a novelized version of the life stories of these characters that we're familiar with from the films. And then it has a great ending where you realize who is the character behind it all. Have you read this book, Anne?
No, I'm just sitting here really fascinated. It sounds great.
It's great, and it's brief. You can read it in one afternoon, and it's really, really interesting book.
And this next one's from Andrew. Eddie and Anne, do you have a personal favorite for a noir villain's downfall? One of the things that hooks me in film noir is anticipating the moment when everything falls apart for the villain and sometimes protagonist. My favorite so far is the expression on William Tallman's face at the end of The Hitchhiker when the cops put the handcuffs on him.
That's a great choice, because most people would say it's a death scene. Mm-hmm. So it's really interesting that this fellow, who is this that submitted this question?
Andrew.
It's interesting that Andrew chose a moment where it's just an arrest, because normally in noir films, the arrest is something of an anticlimax, right? Like, oh, you mean he's just going to get taken away by the police? That's it? Yeah. But I agree that the way William Tallman plays that scene is great. And I appreciate, of course, that Ida Lupino didn't think it necessary for there to be a big dramatic shoot 'em up climax to that film. It's quiet, but it's really, it's very, very powerful. So I guess I'll go the exact opposite and say, how can you do any better than Jimmy Cagney in White Heat? Yeah. I mean, that's the finish of all finishes, right? Because he does it to himself. Mm-hmm. He's trapped, and then it's like he knows he's not going to get away. So when he fires into the tank, knowing exactly what's going to happen, that's a pretty great moment. And it's funny because he specifically said a villain, and so there's some great endings in noir that I love, but it's not the villain. Like Joe Gillis in Sunset Boulevard is, I love it when Gloria Swanson shoots him. I love that whole scene, and he goes into the pool. Sorry, those of you who haven't seen Sunset Boulevard, I just spoiled the whole thing for you. Well, no, it's not really. He's dead at the very beginning of the movie, right?
Yeah.
So
so you haven't given,
but that scene is so beautifully staged. But he's not a villain. And you could say that the end of that film, when Norma comes down the staircase for her close-up, is in some respects her demise, and it's such a fabulous scene. But I don't see how you can do better than White Heat. I mean, I'm just going to stick with that as the most grandiose demise of a villain in one of these films.
Yeah, because that one popped to my mind as well. And then kind of two other ones, and I know I've talked about this before, but still that last scene of Double Indemnity between Edward G. Robinson and Fred McMurray is just one of my favorite film moments of all time. It's so beautiful. And it's a very different kind of demise for a film noir, that kind of tenderness. But I have to say, one of my favorite kind of betrayal moments is still in the remake of The Killers, the one that Don Siegel did, and it's just the scene when the two killers are confronting Angie Dickinson and Ronald Reagan, and she like gives them up,
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Love Reagan's reaction because he's like not surprised. It's almost an eye roll of course you would do that.
Yeah.
It's like, it's like it's just a great piece of acting.
Yeah, that is really good. And that's also that's a great demise for Lee Marvin. And
Oh,
and you know, this question kind of cuts to the heart of noir because he says the villain, but very often the bad guy is the protagonist of the movie, and I don't always immediately think of them as the villain, right? Because
right.
Lee Marvin is kind of, you know, he's our protagonist through the whole film, right? He's the guy who wants to know the answer, and he's going to find out the answer. And you know, that's just such a great ending of that film. You know, lady, I don't have the time. You know, it's just, and then that stagger that he does out of the house and dying on the lawn. I understand that he was a little bit drunk when he did that, which added
a staggering quality.
Added to the quality of the stagger, I guess. But it was just brilliantly done. So there's a few options there to choose from, and there, of course, there's more. You know, I love the ending of Crisscross, and of course. But Dan Duryea is clearly the villain, and yet he doesn't really have a demise in the film. Yeah. But the end of the film is so classically noir, where he corners, you know, the lovers, and you know, that's
yeah. And also, you know, the great thing about the Asphalt Jungle is you see all the demises of all the characters, and they're so perfect because they're, you know, they're caused by their own weaknesses, and you know, so it's like a series of them, you know. And I just, especially the one with the dirty old man giving the
with Sam Jaffe. That's a beautiful choice, and because that may be in my like top 3. I mean, it's a quiet demise, but just the way that scene is written, that he can't resist putting the nickels in the machine to see her dance. You know, Helene Stanley, she was so great in that scene. So really good choice. I like that one.
Okay, this one's from Robert. In addition to film noirs, I'm also really into war pictures, and one war film that I've always been intrigued by is The Young Lions. The picture is helmed by Demetric, and I see a lot of noir elements in the film. Is there a war noir?
That's interesting. You know, I saw The Young Lions, I don't know, maybe a couple of years ago again, and I didn't see that. I didn't get the noir part of it, but I do think there are war movies that are pretty noir. The Aldrich film Attack, even though it was based on a stage play, kind of strikes me as being very noirish. Maybe I'm influenced in my thinking because it was in the midst of that very noir run that Aldrich had in the mid-50s, where he had done Kiss Me Deadly and The Big Knife and Attack. And they, you know, Kiss Me Deadly is genuinely a film noir. The other two less so, but very much feel like film noir. But the war film that I really like quite a bit and feel is noirish is Don Siegel again. Don Siegel's Hell is for Heroes with Steve McQueen. That film has a lot of noirish elements to it, and that Steve McQueen character in the films is very much a noir character to me. And if people haven't seen the movie, I do highly recommend it. I saw it I had never seen it on a big screen until a few years ago. I was at it was a film festival in Europe. I can't remember where it was. And it was just great to see that on a big, I think it was in Lyon. It was at the Lyon Film Festival. And man, that is a good movie. Whew. Hell is for Heroes. Highly recommended. Have you seen it?
No, I actually haven't. Which isn't Bob Newhart in that one?
Yeah, Bob Newhart is in it. And it's funny because...
I know why. Sorry. I was supposed to see it at Turner Classic Movies. They were going to I think they were going to play it in one of the theaters and something happened. So I wasn't either. I couldn't get in, or no, I think it was a last minute cancellation or something.
Oh, that's too bad. But it's funny because Newhart, you know, his telephone thing, they do it with, you know, an army radio, you know, where he's cranking it, and he does his comedy shtick several times in the movie with this, you know, radio, and it's like, that's weird. But
yeah.
What's interesting to me about that is, like, if young people see that film today, they won't have any idea what that is, because they won't know about Bob Newhart and his comedy shtick with talking on the telephone and all that. So they'll just say, this is weird, like comedy relief in the film, and it is. But I really like that movie. It's hard for me to find a Don Siegel movie that I don't find some value in.
Yeah. And then he had kind of a follow-up question. Would you agree that Demetric brought a lot of Noir elements into his other pictures?
I'm not sure. I'm honestly not sure, because by the time he bartered his way back into Hollywood, you know, the Sniper aside, you know, the look and the feel of the movies had changed so much that I don't see, you know, I mean, Raintree County and all this. I don't know. I don't know if I see that. Maybe in Walk on the Wild Side. Yeah. There's some noirish elements to that are sort of inherent in Nelson Algren's story. So, you know, I don't know if it's in the material or if Demetric is doing it consciously. But, you know, subject for further research. Let's put it that way. I'm not saying that I disagree. I'm just saying that it doesn't pop out at me. The way, like a Sam Fuller or a Phil Carlson or a Don Siegel or somebody, I see it pretty clearly in the films they make. But Demetric kind of ranged all over the place in the movies that he made. So some of them I don't see the noir at all.
P.S. He seems to have dodged the career-ending bullet, HUAC, that a number of Hollywood filmmakers took in their chests. Your thoughts?
Yeah, he dodged that bullet because he ratted people out. Sorry, Mr. Demetric, but that was it. I mean, he, like Kazan, he got his career back because he named names, and you know, I'm not in no way do I feel like therefore we can't appreciate his films or something. I just, you know, people do what they do in these situations, and then they have to live with it. And you know, the guy got to make more movies, and a lot of them are really good. Some of them aren't so good. Maybe I better stop there. I don't want to get too political that early in the conversation.
All right. Sounds good to me. This is Marty from Delaware. Do you think active violence with Robert Ryan qualifies as film noir? You're showing it on Noir.
Marty, are you serious? Are you serious, Marty? It's like the perfect film noir. Now, granted, a lot of people will say it can't be because there's no femme fatale in the movie, but man, that is a noir film. It's just incredible. Like, you think the good guy is the good guy, and he turns out to be the bad guy, and you think the bad guy is the bad guy, and he turns out to be not a good guy, but like the angel of vengeance or something. And wow. And the Mary Astor character in that film, Pat, is so incredible. One of the great supporting characters in all of film noir. And you know, Janet Leigh is terrific in that movie. I love that film. I'm going to be showing it again on Noir Alley coming up pretty soon. That's going to be my Memorial Day movie.
Yeah.
on Noir Alley. How fitting, right?
Yeah, it's a great choice.
So, yes, I absolutely think of that as film noir. One of the best, actually.
It's a great film, and I'm hoping that if people haven't seen it, that they will watch it because it is really good. This is from Bob from the UK. Can Bigger Than Life be considered a film noir? I think it can. With the stunning central performance from James Mason, the film charts his descent from alienation to near madness. Bigger Than Life becomes a sharp criticism of American middle-class life in the 50s, surely one of Nicholas Ray's best films, if not his best.
I'm not disagreeing with anything that Bob, is it Bob?
Bob.
I'm not disagreeing with anything that Bob says, although I have my doubts about its noirness, right? Because I know there's a point, the point at which James Mason completely loses it. There's almost a crime committed there, which would tip it over into noir. But the reason I kind of don't think of it as a noir, I do agree that it's a great look at middle-class American life in the 50s, like a Douglas Sirk. It's the closest that Nick Ray got to making a Douglas Sirk picture, but it's the drugs that are the culprit, right? It's the miracle drug that makes James Mason nuts, and that sort of flies in the face of noir, where you're cornered because there's no way out, or the seeds of your destruction are already in you. I mean, I don't know that would have happened until he got the drugs. So if you want to say, well, the villain is the idea that you can cure everything with a pill, then yeah, there's a certain, but I don't know that I would call it noir. There's a lot of Nick Ray pictures that I think of as being noir, even though he is an incredibly hard to classify. His films are incredibly hard to classify. And that's sort of what made him special, is you thought he was working in a particular genre. Like now he's making a crime movie. Now he's making a war movie. Now he's making an adventure film, but they never play out as expected in any of these things. So he's subversive in that way. And Bigger Than Life is a subversive kind of movie, but I don't know. I mean, it's a good discussion as to whether that film qualifies. I know that Foster Hirsch introduced it at the Palm Springs Film Noir Festival years ago, so it was programmed there as a film noir, but that may have been because, well, never mind. But so that's I agree. It's a great film. I think it's one of Nick Ray's best movies. I'm not quite prepared to call it a film noir.
And this is from Ralph. Since you are obviously Ida Lupino fans, as am I, I'd like to get your take on the 1941 Lupino film, Ladies in Retirement. Well, I think it's generally considered outside the date range for traditional noirs. It happens to have some great performances from actors who did a lot of later noir work, including Lupino, but also Evelyn Keyes and Louis Hayward. Also, Lanchester is great in it too. Do you consider it a noir?
I have shown it at my Noir City Film Festivals. I have shown that movie. It's kind of a proto noir in a sense, in that the Lupino character is what really makes it a film noir. And Charles Vidor does a beautiful job directing that film. It's very artificial. It's all very stage bound, but it has a beautiful look to the film. We're going to be showing it on Turner Classic Movies, not on Noir Alley, but during 31 Days of Oscar, I think it's going to be shown, because I think the film was nominated for a few Oscars. And I liked the film very much, largely because of the actresses who are all really good in that movie. So I get it. You know, I don't think of it as any kind of proto-noir or precursor to noir or anything, but it is interesting that Lupino is sort of the villainess of the piece, and she dominates the whole film. So in that respect, yeah, there's a very noirish aspect to it. Yeah.
Okay. Dennis asks, the love triangle between Barbara Payton, Tom Neal, and Franchot Tone was like a noir in itself. If a biopic on Payton were to be made noir style, say similar to the George Reeves Hollywoodland film, who would you cast as Payton, Neal, and Tone?
Oh, brother. You know, I this is kind of embarrassing because I don't really know modern actors all that well. I'm sorry to say. I'll tell you what though, if I was casting, if I was the producer and I was casting that story, I would send the script first. This is going to surprise you. I would send the script to Amy Adams. Mm-hmm. Right? Because
oh yeah, she'd be great.
Because I think Amy Adams is so good, and audiences automatically empathize with her, whatever the character, which I think would be essential to this. Plus, she's so freaking appealing that to see her play such a sadly tragic and debased character would be really great. I think that.
Plus, I think. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
She also has a very classic look, too. I mean, that's, you know what I mean? Her face is very classic, so I think that would also make her a good choice, too. And I really like her as an actress, so.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I remember that a few episodes ago when we were doing this, somebody said, are there any actors today that you could see succeeding in the classic period? And Amy Adams had not, I don't think she had occurred to me, but I think she is one. She does have a very classic look about her. She's very, you know, she's not a kid anymore, but she's very youthful on screen. But there, you know, she's great. She's an incredibly versatile actress who can play innocent and can play tough. So I think she would be able to convey that transition that Barbara Payton goes through. Now, for the guys, I have absolutely no idea. You know, I really don't. I hate to cop out on this, but it'll be fun because this is what I'm enjoying about doing these things is people are gonna tell us who should play these parts, right? Like, I don't know if there's you could probably get a pretty decent Tom Neal today because I think a lot of younger actors have that kind of, that almost hostile virility that Tom Neal had that would work. But I don't know how many Franchot Tones there are.
Yeah.
Around
I think that would
now,
be the hardest part.
That would be the hardest part to cast. And anyway, I'll be curious to see what other people contribute on this one once this is up online. I'm going to stick with Amy Adams, and then we'll see what people come up with for the guys.
Yeah, and I think for Tom Neal, I could see Gerard Butler.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I could. Yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah,
very, very good, Anne. Wow, did you just pull that out of your?
Yeah, it totally just clicked when we were talking.
I can see that because he has that kind of, you know, he's very handsome and he has that kind of Tom Neal, and you know, he has the stubble, and you know, we know Tom Neal from Detour with the stubble and the whole thing, and he was a little rough around the edges, and yeah, Butler could definitely do that. Yeah.
Yeah, but for Tone, I can't think of a single person that could really do that.
Tough. Yeah. That's a hard call. I don't know. Somebody will tell us though.
Yeah. So put it in the comments.
Yeah.
This is let's see, Michael. I'm old enough to remember in the 50s going to the movies in a small town theater, which still had the original nightly format of showing a newsreel, a cartoon, an A picture, and a B picture, all for the price of one ticket. Often the crowd thinned out after the A picture, except for Fridays and Saturdays. Given these circumstances, did studios tabulate gross receipts only for an A picture? If so, how did independent studios, which provide many of the B pictures, make money for a film distributed by a major studio? I love this question.
It's a really good, very sophisticated question, and it's a very difficult one to answer. But no, the grosses weren't tabulated just for the A picture, and all of this is what led to the federal government bringing antitrust action against the studios, because they controlled the vertical integration of the movie business, and the studios would force theaters and distributors and all this stuff to do things their way. So a lot of times the B pictures, they were an add-on to the whole package, right? It wasn't like the A pic people, just because people left the theater, it doesn't mean the B picture wasn't earning out or making money, because the deal had already been made to include this B picture in the package that was being sold to the theaters. But here's the thing. I a few years ago, I wrote an essay for a book called Left in the Dark about the history of movie theaters in San Francisco. And my contribution to this book was a chapter about how the movie business worked back in that era, and how it was eventually considered a racket by the federal government, and why they brought antitrust legislation against the studios, which, mind you, is all happening again.
Yeah.
In a new way with the streaming and Netflix and Amazon and all this. They're recreating the same situation that led to these antitrust matters in the first place, right? Like, you can't own everything, right? You can't own the production, the distribution, and the exhibition of the films. That's what the federal government had declared. But Amazon and Netflix are now, right? And Disney Plus will, and HBO Max and Warner, they'll all own everything, and the business will once again be vertically integrated, which is an anti-competitive thing. So this is, I'm not directly answering this question, but I think I'm indicating how complex this situation was. But the studios back then engaged in these practices that were like organized crime, right? There was block booking and full line forcing and all of this stuff, where it's like, if you want this A picture, you're also buying this B picture, you're buying these cartoons, you're buying these newsreels, you're buying these concessions that you're going to sell in the theater. They controlled it all. So if the B movie wasn't making money, it was like, well, that's okay, because they were really selling the whole package, right? So like a night at the theater, as long as you put the money down, this is how they were enticing you. A picture, B picture, newsreel, cartoon, candy. That's how you make money in the movie business, right? And then gradually these things dropped away, and the B pictures went to TV by and large, right? So that's not a complete answer to this question, but it's as close as we can get in the time that I'm going to expend right now.
I had no idea that they also controlled the concessions.
Oh yeah, yeah. It was like, you're going to buy candy from our guys.
Oh my God.
It was a total racket.
It really was.
It was a total racket. Yeah. Absolutely. And it wasn't like everybody went along with it. I mean, this was a long running battle that's part of the history of movies, is people saying, these guys are crooks. They can't do this. They can't force us to do this. And, you know, the independent, you know, the whatever it was, I'm trying to blank now, you know, Orson Welles and Mary Pickford and Eddie Small and all these guys belonged to the, you know, the Small Producers Association of America or whatever. That was like rallying against the big 8 studios, saying, you know, this is totally unfair. You know, when you think of how many theaters there were in America, and like these 8 studios were trying to control everything, there was always opposition, you know, and this politics and the criminal element has always been in the movie business. It just doesn't get much, there's not much, I'm not going to say there isn't much historical work on this, because there is. It's just the public has never really grasped how the business worked in the first place.
Yeah. Okay, sorry, it was just really interesting. This is from John. I have recently been reading about the difference between Fedora and the Trilby, and the frequency with which Trilbys are mistakenly identified as fedoras. Do film noir protagonists always wear fedoras? Are there any film noir protagonists who wear a Trilby? Is a Homburg ever something a film noir protagonist would wear except as a pretense, since it denotes respectability? Thank you for your answers and your dazzling threads.
Not tonight. No dazzling threads tonight. That's an interesting question. So, okay, the Trilby is predominantly British, and the fedora is the classic hat. As you moved into the 50s and later 50s and early 60s, the Trilby is a stingier brim on the hat, right? And a fedora was always called a snap brim because you could change the brim on a fedora. You could wear it up, you could wear it down, you could wear it to the side, all this stuff. But a Trilby only works one way. The front of the brim goes down, and it's much narrower all the way around. You will see these in a lot of British noir films of the late 50s and early 60s. I'm going to recommend, I'm sorry, I can't remember the name of the person who asked this question. John. There's a movie that I participated in called Borsellino City. That's a documentary about the Borsellino Hat Company in Italy. And I was the talking head in the documentary that discussed the importance of the fedora in cinema, in the history of cinema. And it's really a pretty entertaining documentary. And I think you can get it online, or I don't know who has it, Netflix or whatever. But I really, Enrica Viola is the name of the woman who made this film, and she was great. And then I edited and Americanized the English translation of the film. So she wrote the whole thing for an Italian audience, and then for the American version of the film, I went over the script and Americanized the language, you know, for the release here.
And what was the name of the film again?
It's called Borsellino City. And it's really interesting. If you want to know the history of the fedora and the impact of these hats, culturally, economically, politically, it's really fascinating.
This is from Steve. Do you own one of those iconic hats that helped define the Noir age, the fedora? If so, who made it, and why not put it on for a minute?
I own many. I mean, no kid. I think I probably have like 12 fedoras, right? And colors and styles and the whole thing. But I don't have one here in my office. Sorry, I was not prepared for that. It's interesting. And, you know, when I first started doing this stuff, and when I wrote Dark City, and I did the first couple of festivals, I actually said, when people wanted to do like a story, I said, just don't ask me to wear the fedora.
Yeah.
Because I didn't want it to come off like being cartoonish or something, you know? And then over time, I've really embraced it, you know,
Yeah.
because, you know, the clothes have become like a thing. It's part of the persona now, you know? And I realized it when I was just a guy who wrote a book and they're like, oh, can you put on a fedora or something? It was like, no, that's stupid, you know?
Yeah.
But once I started doing all the film festivals, and you actually have to get up in front of an audience and put on a show, you know, then it was like, well, I might as well wear a nice suit, you know, and I might, you know, and make it a show, you know, like the whole thing. It's like, so, you know, because you're part of it, you know, when you go to Noir City, it's not just like the noir begins when the film starts. It's like we do a whole production. And so my clothes and the whole thing became part of that. And then the hats followed. And then obviously when I got the gig on TCM, I knew they were going to say, Eddie, you know, we want to do promos with you. You know, for God's sakes, they let me smoke cigars on the set and stuff, you know, and it's okay. Now I'm totally good with it. It's fun, you know.
Yeah.
Although I don't have a hat right here that I can put on for this fella right now. Sorry.
Yeah, no, it's just so funny because I just vividly remember the first time I saw you dressed down.
It was a shock, right?
Yeah, it was. It really was.
Doll, you know, my lovely assistant here, my soft-spoken assistant, I think she's in the other room, and she is wearing my father's fedora, right? It is half size too small for me. But she now wears my dad's fedora.
And she looks good in it.
She does. She wears it well.
She really wears it well. Okay, this is from Ernie. When was the expression film noir first coined, and by whom? Was there a particular movie? Was there a particular movie? I'm aware that the style was with the use of camera angle, shadow, and light came from German filmmakers. It's a phrase that the first time I saw it was a bit confusing. 2 words, 2 new languages. Just wondering.
Yeah, this is well, it's interesting. This is probably one of the most asked questions, but there's no real definitive answer. I mean, conventional wisdom now says that Nino Frank, the film critic in Paris, was the one to coin the phrase, which I don't actually believe is true, but I think he popularized it because after World War II, there was a you know, all American films were embargoed in France, the most movie-crazed country in the world, and all the American films were embargoed during World War II when the Nazis occupied France. And so after the liberation, one of the most significant things that happened culturally after the liberation was that the movie theaters reopened and movies from around the world made it into Paris finally. And that's when the Parisians saw all of the American movies that they hadn't seen from 1940 up through the end of the war. And so that's what, and Nino Frank wrote a very famous essay talking about that and saying how surprising it was to see Hollywood having changed so dramatically, because it was now film noir, like black film, because there was such a darker aspect to the films. And he was obviously talking about, you know, This Gun for Hire and I Wake Up Screaming and Laura and Murder My Sweet and Woman in the Window and Phantom Lady, Double Indemnity, all these films that came out during the war but weren't seen in France during the war. So it wasn't until, you know, like early 1946. And there was a cinema in Paris that played nothing but American movies for the entire year. It was like a festival of everything that you weren't allowed to see during the war. And that was kind of where the nomenclature got applied, because they saw so many of these films in a more concentrated way than they were released in America. Where in America, it took Double Indemnity to like win, and I didn't win Oscars, but to be nominated for Oscars, to make a lot of money. That was the film. But in France, when they saw all these movies at one time, the change was really obvious to them. Like something has happened. And yeah, a lot of European directors ended up in Hollywood. That's what happened.
Yeah.
That's not the only thing that happened, but that's sort of how it began. Although I assume the French were talking about this amongst themselves far earlier than that, because, you know, of the Duvivier films like Pepe le Moko and Pierre Chenal's version of The Postman Always Rings Twice. I'm positive that the term was used prior to 1946 in France.
Yeah.
But that Nino Frank essay escaped France. It was published more widely, and so that's why it gets credit for being the one to coin the term. Although I'm absolutely positive that it had already been spoken by the French critics amongst themselves, talking about French films.
Yeah.
You know, prior to World War II and during World War II.
This is from Alan. I had the pleasure of a Zoom chat with Jimmy Stewart's daughter recently. Eddie, have you interviewed her? Her favorite Hitchcock movie with her father was Rear Window. She also liked Rope. Is Rope filmed as if it's a play? She said her father enjoyed working with Hitch because there was no waste of time on the set.
No, I have not interviewed her. And yes, well, Rope famously was shot, you know, trying to make it look like it was one take. So yeah. It is clearly limited to that one set. So it might as well be a film stage play. And, you know, Jimmy Stewart is a great Hitchcock leading man. You know, who do you prefer, Anne? Do you prefer Jimmy Stewart in Hitchcock movies or Cary Grant in Hitchcock movies? Because I think, or Robert Donat in Hitchcock movies, because it's this the one. It's 39 Steps. But I saw it again the other night, you know, because I introduced it on TCM, and it's like, this is so classic, because we showed North by Northwest the same night, and it's like Robert Donat is Cary Grant. I mean, the line readings and everything are like identical. So he's like a precursor to Cary Grant. But what's your take on this?
My pick is Joseph Cotten.
Oh, well, okay. Well, Joseph Cotten is truthfully
best actor in the Hitchcock films. I mean, seriously, his films are, you know, I mean.
Well, yeah, that's it. Because he is definitely the more noirish actor. You know, Jesus, Uncle Charlie is like one of the great characters in all of Hitchcock's cinema, right? Jimmy Stewart and Cary Grant, except for Cary Grant in Suspicion, where he appears to be the villain through the movie, they're innocent. I mean, those guys always are playing innocent characters.
Oh, I mean, Notorious?
Well, okay, but he's...
Okay, I really, because Notorious, he is a horrible human being in Notorious, and I do not think that film was romantic. It bothers me so much that people think that film was romantic.
Because he's using her so badly in the film, yes.
Yes.
Yes. I'm not going to disagree with you. There's a lot of tension. There's a lot of tension in the film because of that relationship that he and Bergman have, you know. So that begs the question, do you think that Claude Rains is the villain, or is he kind of a more vulnerable character in that film.
Honestly, I had more sympathy for Claude Rains than anyone else in that film.
Interesting.
I find him a very sympathetic character in that. Yeah.
Oh, that's a good take. That's a good take. Yeah.
Yeah.
Not that Cary Grant can't be sinister. You know,
Yeah, no,
I wish that he had played that part more often. You know, I wish that he got to play villains in the movies because he can bring that, you know, he can talk you into anything. He can convince you of anything. And you sort of see Joseph Cotten coming a little bit. He's charming. He can be charming. But, you know, in Shadow of a Doubt, these are interesting questions. Like, what if Cary Grant had played the part of Uncle Charlie?
He would have been great
in Shadow of a Doubt.
Yeah.
I mean, right? I mean,
right. Oh, he played him on a radio adaptation.
Really? Oh, you'll have to share that with me at some point. I would love that. I would love that. Anyway, I don't know if we've answered this question. Yes, Rope is like a stage play, and Jimmy Stewart is really interesting because as much as I love him in Rear Window, I mean, he's a much more complex character in Vertigo, because he ends up being the villain.
Yeah.
In Vertigo, you know, and it's funny because Kim Novak told me how much she liked working with Jimmy Stewart because of exactly what they just said. You know, there was no time wasted, and she said he was really, really comfortable to work with. And between takes, when there was downtime to wait, he was very good about just being able to hang and be friendly, but not, you know, he didn't talk a lot. But, you know, she said that he really put her at ease and helped her performance because he was just so easy to be around and was such a regular person. And she really appreciated that. So I think that's kind of what this person is suggesting, talking about, you know, Stewart and Rear Window.
Okay, so John asks, I am interested in discovering non-English language noir. What are the essentials from France, Japan, and the rest of the world?
Oh, good Lord, we could be here for the rest of the night talking about this one. Charlotte or Emily?
Charlotte.
Charlotte. Hello, Charlotte. Welcome to the show. Good to see you again.
You're a little late.
She just gave me the stink eye. You should go to the AFI or the Noir City website and go back and look at our program from our last International Noir Festival, because there's just all kinds of stuff. I wouldn't even know where to begin with French noir, you know, Pepe Lamoco and La Corbeau and Touché Pas Grisby and Rififi, you know, it's endless. And you know, that's it. I'm just going to say, go to the Noir City site and look for the obvious international films, because we have shown Japanese noir, Mexican noir, Argentine noir, Spanish noir, Italian noir, German noir, British noir, French noir, Scandinavian noir. I'm sure I'm missing a few in there. But this is my great delight at this point, is finding these new films, right? Like when we, you know, this last festival, when we showed Black Gravel, the German film from 1960, that was just a revelation for a lot of people, you know, who said this is one of the most noirish films they'd ever seen, right? Yeah. Not in the, you know, it's 1960, it's not in the classic window, but man, was that film intense. And if you like your noir bleak, that's the one.
Okay. Sorry, I thought I was on the next page already. This is from Jacob. Being a Swede, I'm very curious if one of the few Swedish attempts at film noir has made any bleep on your expert point of view radar. I'm talking about the rarely seen This Can't Happen Here by Ingmar Bergman. It is a very atypical Bergman film. Rather it is a tough cookie of a little anti-communist noir, in some parts reminiscent of Pickup on South Street. It is a bit blunt and rough at the edges, but far from as bad as Swedish film historians would have it. And Bergman himself, for that matter, he forbade any screenings post the theatrical run. It has never been on VHS, DVD, Blu-ray, or broadcast.
Yeah. There is. I actually have not seen the film. I know of the film, but I haven't had a chance to see it yet. But interestingly, the Swedish filmmaker that has been rediscovered is Hasse Ekman, who made a lot more than one film, and that you could consider noir. Did you see when we showed Girl with Hyacinths? Did you see that at
that
Noir
was a
City?
great film.
Yeah, that's just a masterpiece. And I think the Girl in the Third Row, I think, is the title, and the White Cat is another one. These are really, really good films. There's also a heist picture, a Swedish heist picture from 59 or 60, the name of which is escaping right now, but it's essentially Swedish for heist.
Yeah.
Is the title of the film, which is really good. I wanted to get that and show it as part of the heist series that I did a few years ago. But yeah, these do exist, and Sweden is one thing, but then we also showed Death is a Caress, the Edith Kalmar film from Norway, which is like a Postman Always Rings Twice from that era, from 1949, directed by a woman, that is an incredible example of how noir plays out differently in these different cultures, because the film is so different from what was made in America 3 years earlier with The Postman Always Rings Twice. Equally tragic, but the social aspects of the film and the cultural stuff is so different, because there wasn't the stigma about divorce in Norway that there was in America. Because it's so funny, because in America it's like, we're in love, but my husband, what will we do about my husband? And because the Legion of Decency wouldn't let them have divorce, it's like, we're going to have to kill him. So I guess, okay, so the murder's okay, but the divorce isn't okay. But in the Norwegian film, it's just like, I have to leave my husband. And then the next scene, they're in a lawyer's office getting a divorce. And it's like, well, that was different. Not that it's going to avert tragedy, but I just found that so fascinating.
Yeah, well, that's one of the fun things I think about watching the international film noirs. You just realize how different cultures, just especially around the sex issue, just how much more uptight that was in the States.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And it is fascinating, because all these stories are kind of the same. And it's noir. They all have this overriding sense of fatalism and doom in them. But the way the characters get there, it's so interesting to see them these stories play out in different countries, and like, what's taboo and what isn't, and how, I mean, it's so weird. Like when you watch Rififi, and when Jean Gervais just comes out of prison, and then he meets his old girlfriend that he thinks betrayed him. And there's that incredibly rough sex scene. It's like, wow, this is amazing. Like, you would never see that in an American, where he's like, take your dress off, I'm going to whip you now.
Yeah.
And then he does it, and it's like, okay, I got it out of my system. Now we'll go back to being normal again. So what was that? Yeah. Anyway.
Okay, so these are two questions about your dad. So we'll do Alan's first. What influence did your father, Mr. Boxing, have on your love of film noir and writing? And what are your favorite boxing movies?
Okay, my dad had zero influence on my love of film noir, zero, because my dad didn't really watch movies. And but writing, he was a writer. So the most important influence he had on me was showing me that you can do this for a living.
Yeah.
My dad didn't graduate from high school.
Yeah.
Right. And he was a writer his entire life. That's how he made money, his whole life long. So that was the most important thing that was instilled in me. Like, you can do this, and you can do this professionally and make money, and you don't need to go to college or train or anything to do it if you know how to tell a story, if you know how to communicate, right? So that's the most important thing my dad imparted in me. What was the second half of that question?
The second half of that question was, what are your favorite boxing movies?
Oh, favorite boxing movies. The same as everybody else. My favorites are the same as, I love the setup, and I love Body and Soul, and you know, those are the two that really stand out. I'm not a huge fan of Champion, and I like The Harder They Fall, because essentially Bogart is playing my father in that movie. But I don't like I don't like what Mark Robeson did with that film in terms of his attitude about boxing, because it was not what Bud Schulberg, the writer, intended. But it's a really good movie. I like The Fighter, the Mark Wahlberg picture with Christian Bale. I thought The Fighter about Mickey Ward was a really good film, and I thought Mark Wahlberg did a great job in that movie. There's a lot of great boxing movies. I mean, Fat City, Leonard Gardner's Fat City that John Huston adapted, is fantastic. In some respects, I don't really think of that as a boxing movie, because it's about a lot more than just boxing.
Yeah.
But it is a great film. I have to say, it's interesting. When I really got into movies, my parents they were really great people, right? And they wanted to foster, they wanted to be part of this thing when it became apparent that I was like, loved films and stuff. And my mom, more so than my dad, would say, let's go see this new movie. I bet it's great. And I have such weird memories of how difficult it was for my mother, because this was in the early 1970s, how difficult it was for my mother to adapt to the new style of films. Right? So she would read something about a film, and she would think of it in terms of her youth.
Yeah.
And like growing up in the 1930s. So she would read a synopsis of Lena Wertmüller's Swept Away by an Unusual Destiny in the Blue Sea. She would read that, and she would imagine that this was like Cary Grant and Irene Dunn or something, like on a desert island. And she'd say, oh, this will be great. Let's go to the movies. And then she'd be sitting there next to me. And if you've seen the movie,
it's
like, oh my God, it is so in your face with the sex and the politics and the language and everything. And she was just mortified. Like, I can't sit here and watch this. This is outrageous. But I was just old enough that she also couldn't take me out of the theater, right? She couldn't drag me out of the theater. Yeah. So it was just uncomfortable, because I said, Ma, I think I want to actually stay and watch this movie, Yeah. and the poor woman was like sitting in the lobby eating like her Toblerone candy and drinking a coffee, like waiting for just in agony, waiting for the movie to end. And this happened more than that time, like she wanted to see Cries and Whispers because she thought it was going to be like The Women. Or it's a story about sisters and the drama and all. And, she didn't realize, like, there's vaginal mutilation in the film, and I just felt so sorry for her, You know, she was trying so hard to like foster this, and it's like none of these movies. And likewise, you know, my dad went with me to see Taxi Driver and Raging Bull.
Yeah.
Especially Raging Bull, because he was like, I don't know, I don't see how they can make a movie about Jake LaMotta. He's the biggest asshole ever, ever. Right? So he wanted to go as like some, like, I can't believe this. Like, what are they going to say about this guy? You know, everybody in boxing knew that Jake LaMotta was just the biggest dick ever. I mean, just not a good man.
Yeah.
And the really amusing part, you know, Scorsese, you know, the language in these movies, my parents just had never heard anything like this, you know?
Yeah.
And it's not like my dad couldn't cuss, because I'd been with him in public where he would use the very same language at the fights or something, but it was not something you would hear in a movie theater, you know, which is a totally different thing. And I just remember how much I loved eavesdropping on his phone calls when we would get home, because he would call his buddies and talk about this, and because, you know, they actually knew Jake LaMotta, right? And it was like, Jesus Christ, can you believe that they would do this? And of course, my dad also thought that the boxing scenes were just absurd. You know, I mean, I got it as a student of film. I got what Scorsese was doing, but my dad actually would like yell out in the theater, "Stop the fight!" Because you know, and he's got LaMotta like bleeding, and he's like, you know, and he's like, "Come on, Ray, come on!" And you know, it's like he winds up the big punch, and my dad is like, "What in the hell is this?" You know, it was so offensive to him. Anyway, that's a long answer to that question, but.
No, because Mark's question was, can Eddie relate any of his father's opinions on boxing scenes?
There you go. I just did it. Just did it.
You answered the second question.
No, yeah, my dad just thought boxing movies were so absurd, like Rocky. He also saw Rocky together, and like, you know, he never got like the idea of creative license in a movie.
Yeah.
You know, and in films, you know, the hero has to have both eyes closed and bleeding and down, and then he sees his woman through the ropes, and it's like, I'm gonna climb back up, and my dad is just like, call it off, it's over.
I never really thought about that in terms of films. That when they get to that point, yeah, you're.
This is my dad's whole life, you know. Yeah. He would do, you know, he'd be at ringside, and my dad would actually like be yelling at the referee, like, "Stop the fight! Stop! What the hell's wrong with you? Stop the fight! You know, this guy's out on it." My dad hated, as all he cared about was boxing. He hated to see people get hurt in the ring. Hated it, you know, and really was hard on the referees who didn't step in time, because it's like, you know, you got to help these guys out, you know, because a fighter will fight to the end.
Yeah.
And it is the referee's responsibility to say, you know, that's enough. Live to fight again, right? You don't want to see anybody hurt. And so my dad would take this over, and it's like, Dad, it's a movie. Dad, come on. Okay, it's a movie.
Oh God. This is from Harriet. I was really disappointed to find out early in Rage of Heaven that Robert Montgomery was the unstable villain. He was great. However, he became so evil so soon that I lost interest. George Sanders was surprisingly romantic. Do you agree that the reveal was a letdown? This is so early in the film.
You know, that's an interesting question. I don't really, because I kind of like it when you know who the villain is. It's like the Hitchcock thing of let the audience know something that the characters in the movie don't know, because that's sort of where the suspense comes in. So I don't really feel that way. It's sort of like, you know, the film we restored, Woman on the Run, when I went back and looked at reviews from the time, there were a lot of critics who thought it was a mistake to reveal, sorry, people who haven't seen the movie, close your ears until we give the signal. There were a lot of people, critics, who said it was a mistake to reveal that Dennis O'Keefe was the villain that early in the film. And I totally disagree with that, you know, because that's where all the suspense comes from.
Yeah.
Right? Is that, you know, so you're fearful for these characters who are dealing with this guy. It's like, don't you see? This guy's the villain. So I rarely have a hard time with that. I don't like, because I'm very much a, you know, team Hitchcock. I very much prefer suspense to surprise.
Yeah.
When you try to hold something until then, it, like, you spring the surprise, that works for about 5 seconds.
Yeah.
When it's suspenseful, it works for the whole movie. It's, you know, and suspense, definitely in cinema, suspense is created by giving the audience information that the characters on screen don't possess. That's how suspense works, right? So that you want to yell out, you know, look out, you know, which is way more effective than a surprise, as far as I'm concerned.
I agree completely. And I also really like, I also like the casting in that film. I enjoyed seeing those actors in those respective roles, especially because I think George Sanders is very charming and sexy. So it's always nice when he gets to play a good guy.
I know that you are a George Sanders fan. You like those caddish guys. You really do. I mean, Joseph Cotton can be quite the cad, and George Sanders quite the cad. I know you're a big Dan Duryea fan. Come on, he's like the quintessential cad. Is this like a real life thing, Anne? Do you go for these caddish people in real life, or you just get off on it on the screen?
It's strictly for the screen. No, I do not. I am not drawn to bad boys at all. That's never been a thing for me. No.
Good for you.
I like all my guys have been super nurturing, and actually it's hilarious. My ex-boyfriend is actually redoing my bathroom right now.
That's good. You got him trained.
I'm paying him, but you know, that's only fair. But he's putting so much work into it. You know.
That's very nice. It speaks well of people when their exes are around. You know, that speaks very well of people, I think.
Yeah, no, we're super close. We actually see each other a couple times a week. we just can't be in a romantic relationship together, but we're very good at friends.
That's how it goes sometimes.
Yeah. And this is from Arthur. Surely you must. Oh yeah, this is kind of interesting question. Surely you must have a favorite rye or two given its appearance in classic films. Please share. It's the same with bourbon, and with a nod to the hoi polloi, even Scotch. As a San Francisco guy, I would hope that you enjoyed Old Potrero rye, one of my favorites. And of course, Anne, please pitch in with your go-to brands.
Now I'm giving booze recommendations.
Yes, so.
Maybe I better start drinking here for this. Okay, so this was a question specifically about rye. Okay, that's wild. Okay, I have what do I have downstairs right now? I have Templeton rye downstairs. I also like the Bullet rye, but the Templeton rye is like that's what I buy. I buy Templeton rye, and the rest of the way, I mean, Four Roses bourbon, because Four Roses has been a sponsor of the Noir City Film Festival, and so I have like a case. So that's good. I prefer Plymouth Gin, Stoli for the vodka, Vida Mezcal. You know, I don't know. I mean, it's just I have more booze in this house than you can imagine. But maybe I shouldn't be doing commercials for these companies if they're not going to give me like shipments of this. You know, I should play it smarter maybe. So
Yeah,
maybe I've said enough.
Yeah. So for me, I haven't had a drink in a year, but when I did drink, for rye, I would always have that for Manhattan. So if I had a Manhattan, I'd always make it from rye. And there's actually one called 1776, which is actually a really good rye, which is introduced to me by a bartender. And then I like Bullet Rye. Bourbon, Maker's Mark. I don't drink Scotch, and so I like bourbon for an old fashioned. But if I'm actually drinking something neat or on the rocks, then I like Irish whiskey. So Jameson. If I could afford it, the only whiskey I would drink would be Middleton, but I can't afford it. Yeah. And I don't drink anymore anyway. But Middleton.
It's funny. I've written things for various publications where they pay me in Middleton. It's like we can pay you, you know, a few $100, or we can give you some Middleton, and I always take the Middleton. You know, it's like why not? You know, yeah. So.
No, we were down there. We were gathered. I remember one time for a Noir City meeting, just you and me in front of house and a bunch of other people. And it was so funny because you said, "Oh, you guys want to drink?" And I spotted that you had a bottle of Middleton. I was like, "I'll take a Middleton."
Good taste, Dan. Good taste.
And Richard followed.
Yeah.
Okay, so
I want you to realize, I don't hide the good stuff when people come over. I don't hide the good stuff.
That I figured if it was out, it was okay to ask for. You wouldn't have it sitting out.
You bet. It's there. It's there for people to drink. That's right.
But that was just a nice surprise. I wasn't expecting that from the meeting. Okay, so here we go. Let's do a couple more questions and then wrap up. Because we're definitely doing a third session, so it'll be the following.
I know, and that boxing thing about my dad, I just went off the rails on that. So
it was interesting.
Okay.
And you wound up answering 2 questions at one time.
Good.
So it's fine. Okay. Do we know who all scripted The Big Combo?
As far as I know, it's Phil Jordan. I know there's always a lot of questions where Phil Jordan is concerned because he gave work to a lot of blacklisted writers and put his name on the scripts, but they wrote them and he just paid them. But as far as I know, it's actually Phil Jordan because he also was a producer of that film.
Yeah.
And I'll that's all I can say. That's all I can say. I should ask Alan. I should ask my buddy Alan Rohde because he has probably more info about Phil Jordan than I do. But I do believe that's one of the scripts that he actually wrote.
In The Long Goodbye, L.A. Gould's Philip Marlowe drives a 1948 Lincoln Continental, an anachronism for the time, in which the adaptation is set, because it's in the 1970s. Do you know anything about where they got the car?
No. But I mean, that's Hollywood. I'm sure they did not have to look hard to find that car in Hollywood.
Yeah. This is from Colette. I recently recalled having seen Sorry, Wrong Number with Barbara Stanwyck. So I bought the DVD and watched it once again. It was still quite good. Is it considered a film noir?
Oh, yeah. You know, it's funny. I did I don't know where the DVD she's talking about. I don't know when that was released. But years ago, I did an audio commentary for a deluxe DVD release of Sorry, Wrong Number. And they never used it. They never released the DVD. And it was really too bad. I know that another one has been recently released. And I think Alan Rhodey actually did the commentary on it. But I had done that for Paramount, and I recorded a video intro for the film. I did the audio commentary, which honestly I thought was one of the best audio commentaries I'd ever done. And the producer of all these special features went to the trouble of making a documentary about Lucille Fletcher, who wrote the original radio show and the screenplay, which is terrific on that film. And then they also staged a whole radio production. They did a new radio production of it. They had the original Agnes Moorehead version on it, and then they staged one so that people could see what went into producing a radio show, because they videotaped the whole thing. And as far as I know, none of this stuff was ever released.
That's so disappointing.
Yeah,
because I'm a huge
really
Lucille
is.
Fletcher fan. I mean, she was an amazing radio writer.
Absolutely.
I would have loved to seen a documentary about her.
And if people don't know, Lucille Fletcher was married to Bernard Herrmann.
Yes, she was.
Yeah, I mean, really, really interesting woman, and obviously a very interesting couple.
Yeah.
But I love Sorry, Wrong Number. I love that movie. I saw it when I was a kid, and it haunted me. And it's so ridiculous when people criticize that, saying, well, it's, they pad the radio show. It's not as good as the radio show. The radio show is great for what it is, but I don't think that movie is padded at all. I think it's a brilliant example of a writer extending what they had created in one format and then extending it. And the people who say, oh, it's, Stanwyck is unbelievable in the non-invalid scenes in the movie, because, she plays a college student at one point, and obviously, but it's like, seriously, like, this bothers you that the greatest actress of all time is playing a college student? It's like, it's the movies. Suspend your disbelief, right? I mean, if you don't like Barbara Stanwyck coming on to Burt Lancaster and like training her sights on him and like, I'm going to get that guy. I mean, that is really strong stuff. And that movie is great from start to finish. The cinematography is brilliant. Litvak's direction is amazing. It's so mysterious when they take the ferry out and like the creepy house in the middle of nowhere, and like, what the hell is going on in this movie? It's fantastic film.
Yeah, and I love the radio show. I mean, it's great, and people should, like, you can go to like archive.org, and it was on Suspense, and Agnes Moorehead was amazing, and it's a great performance. And I always loved the story that Lucille Fletcher told of how she got inspired to do the story. Was that she was like at the butcher's, and there was this really horrible woman being really rude to the butcher, and she started fantasizing about killing her, and that's how she came up with it.
I love that. I love that story. Like, you want to know how the creative process works? You're just trying to get your dinner at the butcher, and this obnoxious woman, and it's like, I got 5 minutes here. Let me think about how she's going to die. So here's how we'll end it tonight, Anne. I was very disappointed because I was scheduled to show Sorry, Wrong Number on Noir Alley on TCM. And that's not going to happen now because Paramount pulled the film, because Paramount is starting its own streaming service. So, and obviously they're reserving that film for their own streaming service. So I can't show it on TCM. So it's great because eventually people will be able to see it, but I guess they may have to buy Paramount's service in order to see it instead of being able to see it on TCM, which doesn't make me really happy. and I won't get to introduce it. So that's very disappointing to me. But if we get back into theaters with the Noir City Festival, I mean, I have shown the film on screen at the festivals, which is a whole different thing. Like Paramount wouldn't object to showing the film theatrically, but apparently they're going to reserve it digitally for their own service. And like I couldn't get it to show online at a Noir City Festival,
right,
because this is going to become an issue going forward, with all of these people thinking, well, we should have our own streaming service as well. And it's like, well, do you really think that people are going to pay for like 8 different streaming services?
Yeah.
Seriously? We love our movies, but who can afford all that, you know?
Yeah.
So on that note, maybe we should wind up. As I see, it's almost 90 minutes tonight.
So we should definitely.
I'm hoping that I did, because I recorded this one, and I'm hoping I did it right, because I realized when I started recording, I didn't have this in the gallery view. I had it in speaker view. So people may be seeing a lot of you in this episode. And I don't know, I may be small and you may be big.
I hope not, because on my end, we're equals.
Well, yes, but I don't know how this, works. So I don't know. It's probably, anyway, I trust that when people watch these, they're not like staring at us. I hope they're like listening, like, you know, and not, but who knows? They may be staring because they want to see Charlotte. They want to see Charlotte, and they want to see Milo and Emily, and you know, so they may just be watching. But okay, if I goofed it up, I apologize, and unless you're like huge Anne fans, because then you got what you wanted tonight, because you got to see Anne all through the whole thing. So that's good. It worked for me. It totally worked for me. So there you go. Okay, so we're going to do another one
next week.
Okay, so whenever you're seeing this, there's another one coming in a week.
Following Thursday.
Okay, very good. Okay, that's it. We've hit the 90-minute mark. So let's say thanks everybody for your fabulous questions. That was fun. That was a great fun, Ann. And
I know.
We will see you again soon.
We will see you next week. Thank you so much.
Bye.
Hey, good night, Eddie.
Good night, Ann.